we want to look at in this video the process of statistics. So as we defined previously, statistics is in fact a science. And so these four processes of statistics should look somewhat familiar in that they kind of resemble the scientific method. The first thing we want to do is identify the research objective that we want to look at. By that, we want to ask some sort of question that needs to be answered. And in that question, we also want to be able to clearly identify the population that we're going to study. Then after that, in order to we need to collect the data so that we can answer the question that we just posed in part one. So we can't conduct data or collect data on an entire population, as that's usually, like we talked about from the census, although maybe not as large. We typically don't talk to every person in a population because it can be kind of difficult and expensive. So instead, we will look at sampling. Sampling is really critical point to the statistical process, because if you don't end up collecting the data in a correct manner, the conclusions that you draw from the process could be misleading or maybe even be meaningless, right? There could be some pushback on your discussions or on your findings. After we are collecting the data, we need to describe the data. So remember, we said descriptive statistics is allowing us to numerically show through numerical ways, tables and graphs, an overview of the data that we collected. Generally, it helps the researcher understand kind of what it was that they collected. And typically in this class, that's what we're going to be looking at in chapters 2 through 4. After we have performed descriptive statistics on the data, as far as describing the data, we move on into the inference portion. So we perform some sort of inference on the data where we are going to apply some sort of technique to be able to extend the results we obtained from the sample onto the larger population as a whole. And we do this by generally reporting some sort of level of reliability in those results. This is the last part of our course, and it's what we generally handle in chapters 9 and 10. Let's take a minute and look at an example of this through the process of gun control. Here I have an example that says the AP wants to learn how adult Americans feel existing gun control laws infringe on their Second Amendment rights in the Constitution. So the first step in applying the process of statistics is to identify some sort of research objective. Here the researchers wanted to determine how many or what percentage of the adult Americans believe that gun control laws do infringe on their on their right to bear arms. And you can see that they are identifying the population they want to be able to draw this conclusions on, and that would be the population of adult Americans. So step 2 in this process has to do with collecting information. And as we saw just a moment ago, it really would not make a lot of sense for us to go out and try to speak with all 200 plus million Americans to determine their position here. So instead, we sample. And from that, we see here that researchers surveyed 1,007 adult Americans and found 514 of them believe that it does infringe on their right to bear arms. So the third step after we have collected the data is to be able to describe or organize the data that we've just collected. So the way that we can do that, one of the ways that we can do that is to look at the numerical summary. 51% or 514 out of 1,007 of the people surveyed stated that they do believe that it infringes on their constitutional rights. So that 51% becomes our descriptive statistic and is one part of our numerical summary for the data. And then finally, what can I do with that 51%? Well, this is where we draw some sort of conclusion about the data. So if I only surveyed 1,007 people out of the entire population of Americans, I need to be able to, with some certainty, some degree of certainty, I need to be able to say that not only do I believe that these 1,514, or 51% of the people surveyed believe this, but I now want to be able to say that I believe some percentage of the American population believes it the same way. We do this by reporting a margin of error. So you can see here that the AP reported a 3% margin of error with a 95% certainty. So what does that mean when we're drawing a conclusion? It means that we believe that anywhere between 48%, which is going to be the lower end of our margin of error, all the way up to 54% of adult Americans believe that this gun control laws infringe on their Second Amendment rights. And this inference part, which again is what we do towards the end of the semester, is kind of talking to that larger conclusion we're looking at. We have discussed already that when we are looking at data that we're collecting, there has to be variability in that data. So if my question is, do you believe gun control infringes on your rights? The variability comes from the fact that if I speak with a different set of 1,007 people, and then I do that again and again and again, multiple different times, every time I talk with 1,007 people, American people, and I ask the same question, I should get back some different percentage of Americans that believe in this way. Our margin of error gives us the wiggle room to be able to say, well, when I repeat this multiple different times, I could get anywhere between 48% saying that they believe it infringes on their rights, all the way up to 54% believing it infringes on their rights. And the 95% certainty is a value that we will assign towards the end of the semester. So that's how we go about showing the process of statistics, and this is what it kind of looks like in this control, or in this example on gun control.